Committee and let the Kansas Livestock Association Young Stockman Academy introduce themselves one at a time and tell where they're from and who their senator is, because some of you may have constituents in this group of young people. So I don't know, Ms. Nickel, where you want to start, but I'll just turn it over to you and you can tell who's going to start. Well, it's
You get on both sides today.
welcome to the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, young people. And yes, Senator Reichman, it's interesting that we were all thinking the same thing. We really appreciate you being here, so it'll help us keep Senator Reichman under control. But it was interesting to realize that several members of this committee, including Senator Blue, has a constituent in the audience today. But Senator Reichman, yes, you certainly have more than the rest of us combined. But welcome to the committee. We will start by looking at approval of the minutes committee. You have been emailed the minutes for January the 15th, 16th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, January 28th, 29th, and 30th. I trust you've had an opportunity to review the minutes, and so if they look like they're good to go, I will accept a motion. Senator Starnes, make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes as presented.
All right, we have a motion, and we have a second by Senator Reichman. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. We will pick up committee where we left off last time when we were together. We were looking at Senate Bill 111. Senate Bill 111, we got through the proponents, neutral, and we were ready for opponents. And I know some of you have been away from the Capitol for a few days, so I'm going to allow our reviser just to give us a brief overview of what Senate Bill 211 is, and then we will get to opponents of the legislation. Reviser Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 211 deals with the Commission of Wildlife and Parks. So current law states that the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks shall submit proposed rules and regulation to the Wildlife and Parks Commission, and the Commission then either approves, modifies, approves, or rejects the proposed rules and regulations. Senate Bill 211 would add "or members of the commission" in that. So if a member of a commission has a proposed rule and regulation, the member would submit that to the commission for review.
Questions of our reviser? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate that overview. We will now move to opponents, and we've got Justin Cobb from the Nature Conservancy. Mr. Cobb, you are up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The opportunity to provide opponent testimony on Senate Bill 211 on behalf of the Nature Conservancy. As a conservation nonprofit, the Nature Conservancy strongly supports the right and ability for Kansans to hunt, fish, and trap. Many of our properties are enrolled in walk-in hunting for this very purpose. But just as importantly, we support the scientific management of that wildlife to preserve and allow that ability for that recreation to occur. And so we are in opposition to Senate Bill 211 because of our concerns of the concerns regarding the scientific integrity that we have, that this bill might affect the process. And we do really agree with the sentiment brought by the proponents a couple weeks ago. This bill is not about any particular issue before the agency or the commission, it's about the process. And so, as the revisor outlined pretty clearly in statute, there is a very nicely established process of checks and balances between the agency and the commission. And the principles that outline those statutes and why it is that way are very important to acknowledge. So first and foremost, the commission represents the public. The commissioners are duly appointed because of their experience, because of their knowledge, because of their ability to represent the Kansas public, who are the owners of the wildlife of Kansas. And so they provide that perspective. They bring their significant expertise in the areas that they've had, their professional knowledge, and they are able there to question the agency on their proposed regulations and ultimately have that singular power to amend, approve, or reject whatever the agency proposes. So they really provide that public perspective because the people of the Kansas own the wildlife of Kansas. On the other side, we have the agency. The agency is responsible for providing the science to the table. And when we say science, we should understand it not as a static knowledge that they went to school at one point, they were granted science knowledge, and now they can apply it. It's really a dynamic process. These staff biologists are assigned to a region, they're assigned to a species or a subspecies, and they're responsible for the full-time survey of that species and the active management of it. They submit their data for peer review. They are responsible. They are the sole subject matter experts for that wildlife across the country. And there's really no substitute for their knowledge on those particular issues that they bring to the regulatory process. And so those are the principles that outline why we have this check and balance between the science and the public. And it is common, and it has been common, it is common, and it will continue to be common that there'll be disagreements between these two entities. Legitimate disagreements over how data is collected, interpreted, and applied. And currently that way that works is that there are challenges, there are disagreements brought forward in a public forum, but ultimately both sides have to agree for regulations to go forward. And that's a really powerful process that puts checks on both sides. And so the concern that we have is that this would fundamentally alter the disagreement nature of the regulatory process. Now we'd be able to remove the agency's science role, the role of the biologist that the state of Kansas pays and entrusts to manage our wildlife could be removed if there was a disagreement between the commission and the agency. You would essentially only need the votes of 4 commissioners to initiate, approve, and implement any regulation. That doesn't mean that it's going to be inherently bad or unscientific proposal, but it does mean that there was a disagreement. The agency, those official biologists disagreed, and we've now given a sense of almost a nuclear option to the commission to bypass what would usually be a very, very scientific and very drawn-out discussion. So for that reason, and those concerns that we have, we do stand in opposition to this. I'd be happy to take any questions that the committee has.
Committee, do you have questions of Mr. Cobb? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. One of the questions that I have is in the second line of the bill, and it says, this act concerning wildlife and parks relating to the rules and regulations requiring members. Does this require members or does this allow members?
So I'll reflect a little bit on some of the testimony we heard a couple of weeks ago where I believe there's a shall in the bill. That shall currently also exists for the agency's responsibility, that the agency shall. And so I believe that it was put there as well to apply to the commission. I would defer to the intent of the proponents, but I think we heard a little bit that it might be a may instead, so that we wouldn't have the obligation to. But that's some of my observation from the testimony 2 weeks ago.
And then the other question I have, I've been fortunate to be on several boards, like the school board. I haven't been on city council, but some of the city council. Is this board or this commission different than a school board? Is it different than a board of county commissioners?
It is certainly different, Mr. Senator. And I think that the nature of managing wildlife is the main reason that it's different. And without having the comprehensive knowledge of all of our commissions and all of our boards across the state, I would say just from the general experience I've had with natural resource management, they are more empowered than the average commission when it comes to making statewide regulations because of that inherent nature that the people of Kansas own the wildlife, so they've been entrusted with that power. But to some of the bodies that you mentioned, we do have that duality that's not always common, where we have an agency that plays a role as well. But so I would say that they are substantially different.
Thank you.
Additional questions, committee? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cobb, for your testimony today. If a single commissioner could submit a proposed rule and regulation, it would still require the entirety, it would still require a majority of the commission to take that and actually enact on it, correct?
Yes.
And are the biologists that work for the agency, are they the sole arbiters of scientific truth?
Absolutely not, Mr. Shane, Senator Shane. And so I understand your question and the intent of that. And so I would say simply they are not. They are the closest thing that we can get to on-the-ground facts for our Kansas wildlife. And this process that allows them to bring their knowledge and their expertise to the table and then be challenged by the public, by the commissioners, is what we like. But they're certainly not the whole truth and the nothing and the sole truth.
So if there was a, we'll just say like a rogue commissioner that wanted to bring out a fully drafted regulation that did not go through the vetting process, the commission could stop such rogue commissioner if that were to happen.
Absolutely, you need 4. And so allowing the proposal of 1 does not mean that it could slide all the way through, but if you had a consensus of 4, that's where you would have a concern.
Thank you.
Additional questions, committee? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cobb, is it really more a matter of procedure that hasn't been correctly laid out in statute, or objection to the idea in general of commissioners being able to propose regulations?
Great question, Mr. Senator. And I think that it's more so ensuring that the process is done correctly. It's not the idea. And so I think that there was a question previously asked of the committee, what if we made the process clearer so that the commission could play the same role as the agency, and then the agency could thereafter play the same role as the commission? And we would have no objection if that was the proposal, as long as there's still a role for both to play in the process and it's not just being one-sided. I don't know what that would look like, but if that was available, we would not object.
Senator Ware.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So is part of your concern that if we don't have or have a less than a smaller voice for the scientists and such, that it could be detrimental to our wildlife management?
Yeah, Senator Ware.
Perhaps become political even?
I would hesitate to say the exact concern of what proposals might come, essentially to say that there's no substitute for the staff biologists and their input on regulations, and we would not want to see any process that would allow that to be subjugated. And so whatever the motivations might be for cutting them out of the conversation, I can't speak to, but we just want to make sure that they do have a spot at the table.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, Mr. Cobb, appreciate you being here and providing testimony. Our next conferee, I don't know if they are in the room or not. Okay, Lauren Still, past Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Commissioner. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Still.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here, Mr. Chairman, and the committee acknowledge that you did allow me the opportunity to testify via WebEx. I appreciate that, but I'm very happy to be here with you today. I've been a passionate hunter since the age of 9, but I'm not going to tell you how many years that's been. Too many. I'm an active outdoors woman. I hunt, I fish, I camp. I spend significant time teaching and mentoring others in the development of those outdoor skills as well. I served as a commissioner from 2019 until June of 2024. My father worked for the Kansas Fish and Game Commission from 1963 through 1981. He left then and spent another 25 years working for a conservation NGO. But the point of my sharing that is that I grew up in and around the agency. Not that that entitled me with any kind of biological knowledge, but a deep understanding of the processes, past and now more present. My dad taught me by word and example that everybody needs to do their part. And so today, my part's just to share a little bit of very brief history and perspective on this bill. In 1987, Governor Hayden and the legislature merged the Kansas Fish and Game Commission with the State Park and Resource Authority. It created a cabinet-level agency named the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. Added tourism, subtracted tourism. It established the secretary position where before we'd had a director and assistant director. Commission duties were stripped and left in two categories. One was the approval, modification, and rejection of regulations, and two, to advise the secretary. The commission was to be a gubernatorial-appointed board of citizens from across the state representing all constituents, including hunters, anglers, fur harvesters, campers, wildlife watchers, and others who enjoyed Kansas natural resources. They were to be citizens, not professionals. The commission has required a partisan blend since 1939. That is nothing new. The separation of the commission from personnel matters in 1987 was significant and is a boundary that's been respected for the most part over the past 38 years. While I can't address the legal issues of the commission requiring actions of any employee, the ethical and practical barrier placed by Governor Hayden and the legislature has served both the commission and the department well. So there's at least some historical precedent to preclude the commission from requiring or having power or authority over any employee. Enough on the history. In my written testimony that I submitted a couple weeks ago, I gave you 4 examples of commission regulations that have gone through the commission process since I was a commissioner. In one, the very first example that's there, a commissioner requested a change allowing a fishing rig called an umbrella rig, and it has more hooks on it than was previously allowed by regulation. And so he said I would, request that we would look at making this change. Staff did some reporting, came back, said we can't find anything initially. The commission said, let's move forward then. So they brought more research. We went through the typical process, which is at least 3, typically 4 meetings in discussing a potential change before it's moved into the promulgation process. That reg went through that workshop process, consensus to move it forward. It went through promulgation, 60-day notice, came back for public hearing, commission passed. So it was a commission or a commissioner request that that regulation stemmed from. I'm not going to go through all the rest of them. The second example I gave you is an example where a member of the public requested a change. The third one is an example of a commissioner requested change that did not go through. I had a young constituent call. She wanted to be able to wear pink instead of orange for safety equipment. We requested that staff look at it. There came back vital evidence that that would not be as safe for people in the field, so we did not pursue that farther. The fourth example is a highly collaborative process that occurred that involved input from public, the staff, and the commissioners to come to that regulation and enter it into the process. There's a fifth example that I should have included and didn't think about it. And this is one that took a lengthy process of developing what came to the regulation where we decided to suspend the fall turkey season. It started before I was on the commission, so either probably 2017 or 2018. Staff came to the commission, said turkey populations are declining. We're looking at all the different options that we have. Suspending the fall turkey season, which accounts for 300 to 400 birds harvested in probably the eastern 2/3 of the state. So it's not a tremendously large, it's not like spring turkey season. But they felt like this was the least invasive, potentially had some positive impact on the turkey populations. They suggested to the commission that we suspend the fall turkey season. For 4 or 5 years straight, the commission said no. Staff and secretary did not run roughshod over the commission. They were urging us to do that. The commission was not convinced as a whole that that was the best thing to do. Eventually, the turkey populations continued to decline. Other interventions were not working. And eventually, the commission did accept the suggestion and pass the regulation that we needed to suspend the fall turkey season until such a time as the populations rebound and we can reinstate that. So it is an example where staff does come and does not always get the regulation that they have in mind. So these are just a few examples of how the process that's been in place since 1987 works. Just as you, Mr. Chairman, have a great deal of influence over which bills get worked, which don't, and the other machinations of this committee's work, the commission's chairman's position, he has a similar role. On behalf of the commission, the chairman can request of the staff, would you please draw up that in a draft for us so that we have something to work with? He can decline to pursue a regulation. Alternatively, the commission can use parliamentary procedure and go through and request the regulation be drafted. Prior to moving regulations from the workshop discussion phase in commission meetings into the promulgation phase, it really is important that that commission chairman has a kind of a feel for where the commission is, what the consensus is, so that the whole promulgation process is not a waste of time. Because when that bill comes back to the commission for the public hearing and vote, if there's any changes that need to be made, it starts all over again. And so we don't want to waste all the time of other state agencies and individuals by pushing something through that isn't fully vetted. Consensus does not mean that the commission is all in agreement. It does mean they feel the public has been fully heard, that the regulation is as well crafted as possible, and that at the proper time, after the promulgation process, public hearing, a vote can be taken without further amendments or questions. So I believe much of the confusion has been over this lack of understanding of process and the term vote. As a commissioner, the word vote refers to the formal, recorded roll call poll taken after a regulation has been worked, emerged the promulgation gauntlet, had a public hearing after the 60 or 30-day notice, public hearing, and then a vote. That's the only time that the commission actually votes. Any polling of consensus, parliamentary procedure actions before then aren't votes. I think there's been confusion over that in some of what's happened in recent commission meetings that has kind of brought this issue before you. So the commission members already have the ability via parliamentary process or through the chairman to request regulations to be drafted. The proposed change does not improve that process in any way. It does create the potential for significant inefficiency in the process, unnecessary confusion, and potential legal or ethical dilemmas in the relationship between the commission and staff. This bill is not a minor or inconsequential change. When you consider it in light of this additional information and some history, I'm asking you to oppose SB 211. It does not solve a problem. It will not improve public input. It will not improve sound park and wildlife management. It will not contribute to fulfillment of the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks mission. It will lead to additional confusion, wasted time and spending, and potential abuses by self-interested commissioners and special interest groups. With that, I stand for any questions.
Committee, do you have questions of our conferee, Senator Bowser?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. I really appreciate your point of view here. The whole reason we're having this hearing and the whole reason this bill has been proposed is because, and I'll quote from the Attorney General's testimony here, we've got a commissioner who's on the same page and the Attorney General, and I'll quote here, the Secretary has refused to place on the agenda any items requested by the commissioners. That's the whole crux of the issue. Apparently the Secretary is not allowing ideas from the commissioners to bubble up and be voted on. So how do you respond to that? Thank you very much.
Neither of the two methods that I outlined have been used. There has not been a request of the chairman, and the chairman has not requested a draft of that potential regulation, nor has that commissioner placed a motion, gotten a second, and received support for having it drafted. That's all that it would take. And that has not been done in a commission meeting yet. It's been approached differently than that. But neither of those steps has been approached. It's that simple. That's all it takes. Parliamentary procedure to make a request.
Additional questions, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the Secretary have veto power over the commission?
No, sir.
So the Secretary can't reject if there was a 4-3 vote, if that's right, he can't reject that.
I have never seen that happen.
But is it possible?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Hull, for being here and sharing this better understanding of the process. So we've been concerned about may and shall, and I think there's a real difference here because I don't think the commission would want for the Secretary to be able to promulgate rules and regs without them going through the commission. So that's the shall. That I think it says the Secretary shall submit to the commission all proposed regulations. The may, you don't want to make that may because then the Secretary could, I would think, promulgate regulations without going through the commission. I'm just trying to look at the bill. So I think we're confusing the process. So the promulgation process, and Mr. Chair, maybe we could also have research help us go through those steps of what has to happen. Because this isn't a commission where you can just say, here's a rule, I'd like you to vote on it, and it become part of law. It would have to still go through rules and regs.
I'm not an attorney. And I'm really nervous about being here today. but I have thought long and hard on this, and I'm a pretty detailed person. And so I have tried to take everything I know about history, about different ways on controversial and non-controversial regulations that I have seen over the past 5 years. And I have tried to read this in great detail. And what does propose mean? As it is here. The best that I can understand that sentence in here is that there begins discussion with commission and with staff about this is the status and this is maybe the direction we need to go. Whether that direction suggestion comes from the public, from a commissioner, or from the staff. It starts there. Here's the issue, and here's a direction that we may need to go. At some point, and it varies a little bit depending on the regulation, at some point it goes from a point of discussion to a drafted regulation. I think that what that is referring to, or at least as I understand practice, that sentence refers to the point from which all of that discussion and the request for a draft, when that draft gets handed the commission, because then the commission can accept, amend, or reject. Prior to that, there's nothing to accept, amend, or reject. So the propose comes when that gets introduced. Well, typically, because staff wrote that up, we don't have the ability as commissioners to write that. So we request the secretary to do it, and then he brings that to the commission. I think that's what that sentence talks about, and I think that's why the secretary shall is so that it doesn't bypass the commission. He is the representative, he is the leader of the agency. That's my best understanding of that. And it's a little awkward if you think about someone on the commission submitting to the commission that regulation. Again, who writes it? That's a whole nother ball of wax I cannot address except to tell you there's precedent, historical precedent to keep commission from authority and power over employees. But I can't address that any further than that. I don't know if that experience clarifies that. The requiring piece is scary. I don't understand that. I'm assuming it's I don't know. I better be quiet.
Your comments have been very helpful to me in understanding more about the process and paying more attention to some of the particular words.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, committee, we do not have any additional opponents, so we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 211. We have a little bit of time, committee. Next week, we will have the great privilege of spending time looking at budgets. I have asked Mr. Drury, fiscal analyst, to provide the committee with a little bit of information that was provided to the Senate Ways and Means Committee just yesterday. Thank you. I will give you a moment to look at the information. Probably will, not yet, not yet. The main reason, in addition to the fact that we will be looking at the budget for the Department of Agriculture, the Kansas State Fair, Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Division of Environment, the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, and the Kansas Water Office, I wanted the committee, particularly our newer members, to have an opportunity on the very front. You will see a summary of expenditures from fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2026. You can see the green line is all funds, which are tax dollars, fee funds, federal money, etc. State general fund is the blue line. That is Kansas tax dollars. That's really the thing that we have the most control over. And then you can see the inflation rate change. The reason I'm handing this out, you can see on the state general fund that in 2019, the actual expenditures, $7.03 billion in expenditures. Fiscal year 26, 10.6 in round numbers, billion dollars. Committee, when you do the math, you will see that the legislature has been spending an average of $422 million more every year than the previous year. When you look at the all funds, from 16.9 billion to last year it was 27 billion. This year's down a little bit. But when you look at those numbers, run the math, the average is over $1 billion increase in spending by the Kansas legislature. That is unacceptable to me as a legislator and as a taxpayer. So again, this is primarily for your information to have. It will be my desire, my intent, any agency that goes through this committee, we will be doing our part to make certain that we are not increasing spending according to these historical lines. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Drury to step to the mic, and I don't know if there's anything particular he wishes to mention or point out to the committee, but I also wanted the committee, if you have questions of this brief information, and believe me, you'll get a whole lot more information when we get into these budgets than just 4 pieces or 2 pieces of paper front and back. Mr. Drury, is there anything you would like to mention to the committee? Because you will be the man who will be making the presentations to the committee for the budgets for those particular 5 agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm Luke Drury. I'm a senior fiscal analyst with Kansas Legislative Research Department. And as the chair indicated, I will be presenting those 5 budgets to the committee. I do work with Ag and Natural Resources agencies, their budgets. I would just note for the committee that the materials that you all have, as the chair indicated, is the overview for what is the bill explainer for House Bill 2007. So this reflects the current House positions. This pamphlet, or this little couple pages as indicated, is simply an overview, and then also too, then on the back side is specifically the Ag and Natural Resources section. The entirety of this document is much larger. The overview can be found on the legislature's website. There's a very large packet with all the different item entries all across all state agencies, and that is available online. This is a condensed version, again, with the general overview and the Ag and Natural Resources budgets. Should there be any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but as the chair indicated, I will be presenting these budgets to the committee upcoming.
Committee, I realize you may say, well, that's just the nature of government to increase spending. Well, it does not have to be the nature of government to increase spending at that level. Do you have questions of Mr. Drury today? And like I said, you will have plenty of opportunity to ask a lot of questions because you will receive much more detailed information. I just want to give you a high level of the overall state budget, and this is, as Mr. Drury indicated, the position of the Kansas House for 2025 because they have passed a substitute for House Bill 2007. That is their budget position. You will have an opportunity on the floor to vote on the Senate's budget here in the next 3 weeks. But next week, we'll be spending time on that. Any questions of Mr. Drury at this time? All right, none. Oh, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I note that, and this makes sense, the years you've given us are from 2019 through fiscal year 2026. Certainly one of the things we saw during that period was additional federal spending and federal money coming to the state in terms of the Reinvestment Act, COVID funds. has the research department looked at what are the funds that we have typically received from the federal government, and what were special funds for those special events?
Mr. Chair, Senator, to answer the question, we do have data on state general fund, special revenue funds, and then federal funds. For the purposes of this breakdown, it is simply general fund and then all funds. Now, all funds would include all those federal dollars that you indicated, in addition to other appropriated funds such as the State Water Plan Fund, NEDIF funds, others of that nature. We do have that breakdown. It's not currently here, but that is certainly something that I can provide to the committee, to you, if you would like, as well. But we do have that data. It's just simply not reflected here.
Mr. Chair, if they already have that data, I think that would help us understand some of the changes in these numbers over the years. It's always hard when there's been, some specific events that we haven't traditionally seen. So I appreciate that.
I understand and appreciate that, Senator Francisco, and that would fall in the all funds category, not the state general fund. And so if you were to back this up into previous years before fiscal year 2019, looking at 18, 17, 16, et cetera, you will see this line just pretty much follows this trend here. Sometimes it goes down slightly, as you will see that the difference between fiscal year 25 and 26 in House Bill 2007 is down slightly, which is a good trend. But historically, it doesn't happen that way. And so I appreciate, Mr. Drury, Committee, I appreciate you having this information, and you're welcome to reach out to him if you wish any information. He can provide you with an overview of each agency budget. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going to ask you to bring some of that information for the committee. Because tomorrow, committee, we will spend some time looking at Senate Bill 213. We will discuss and potentially work Senate Bill 213. And we will also take a look at and have discussion on Senate Bill 211. And then we may, depending on how much time we have, if any, might start delving into some of the numbers for state agencies. We will meet on Monday. I know we haven't, and I don't like to, but we've got to get our work done when it comes to reporting to the Ways and Means. I have to, as chair, report to the Ways and Means Committee on March the 10th of all of the budgets. So that means next week we have to have them all wrapped up. It will not be my intention to work Friday, but we shall see how the committee processes works, how much progress we make next week on budgets. Questions, committee, or anything for the good of the committee before we adjourn? Seeing none, we are adjourned.